Hi everyone, and welcome to this online lecture on external analysis. Here is the content of your textbook. So today we're covering the chapter on the external environment, chapter 2. What you will see on the slides in this lecture are the elements that I think are important that you should read and study in that chapter. If you remember the graph that I drafted on the whiteboard during our in-class session, I consider the external analysis to be a part of the strategy formulation or strategy crafting process. Right. So first the chapters that we're going to cover, the 4 activities of the external environmental analysis process. We're going to look at the general and industry environment, opportunities, threat, key success factors, some important element. We are also going to look briefly at strategic groups as well as competitive intelligence. So, external analysis. It means to scan, to monitor, to forecast, and to assess what you find in the environment. Scanning means that you identify early signals from the environment. It is particularly important in highly volatile environments when things are changing very quickly. Monitoring, what does it mean? It means to detect meaning. What's happening in the environment? How important is this for us? For example, the value of the Canadian dollar is decreasing rather rapidly. So you need to decide, is this going to be an important trend for my company? Then you need to try to forecast. So how do you project things will evolve, and also to assess, which means to determine what's going to be the impact on the trend on your organization. Canadian dollar, should we try to sell more to the US as a company, or should we find other sources of supply than US ones? So performing the external analysis means performing these 4 activities described on this slide. Having said that, how should we start? Where do we start when we want to perform an external analysis? Where should we start to perform our external analysis? Well, we need a model. Now, what does a model mean? Well, I used to have an old statistics prof who used to tell us that a model is a scaffolding that you place along reality. I thought that was quite a powerful image. So it's not the reality, but it's your best approximation of the reality. So we do need a model when we start this overwhelming task of performing the external analysis. So what is going to be our model? Our model is going to be in 2 levels. So we're going to have a first level that is going to be the general environment. Sorry for my handwriting. And we're also going to have the second level, which is the industry environment. So this is what I'm going to present next, the general environment and the industry environment. So the first level of analysis in our model of the environment is the general environment. It comprises 7 segments, and you need to understand them. So I would invite you to read the sections of your textbook where they are explained and where examples are provided. So 7 segment: demographic, sociocultural segment, political legal segment, economic segment, technological segment, global segment as well as the physical environment. It's interesting to note that back in the days when I was studying strategy myself, we were only talking then about the first 5 segments, so demographic, sociocultural, political, legal, economic and technological, but we were not talking about the global segment or the physical environment. So it tells you how the world has become more globalized since, and also how the concern for the physical environment and the cause that any business activity may do to the environment, that is something that we need to have in mind as business students and as business practitioner. All right, so let's look at this other slide as an important message. I guess it's a message of a lesson of humility, because what you learn when reading this is that, well, firms cannot directly control the general environment segment. No matter how powerful or how charismatic you are as a manager, you cannot influence these 7 segments. Your job as a strategist, however, is to continually scan them, and no matter how ambiguous or uncertain is the information, it needs to be collected, it needs to be updated, it needs to be interpreted all the time. So really, as a strategist, you need to stay on top of things. So we're going to look at these segments together rapidly. Demographic, sociocultural, and political legal segments are covered on this slide. So basically, the demographic segment has to do with the population size, mix, and so on. Things that you would consider are, for example, baby boomers are retiring. They're going to have more money to spend, more time and money to spend, for example, on outdoor activities, which would have an impact on the sportswear industry that we have discussed together in class. Income distribution, ethnic mix, immigration, these might all have an impact on the demand for exotic food, or exotic travel destination. Since July 2015, 1 person out of 6 in Canada is over 64, and that's more than the number of people that are under 15. So this element is going to have an impact. Well, I went to my local Starbucks today, and I really thought that the door was very, very hard to push. And I was thinking about my late mother, who was always complaining that, how difficult are the doors to push, to open. So those are things that we're going to need to consider, the impact on aging population on the various product and services that are going to be that should be offered, and how they should be offered. If we move on to the socio-cultural segment, this new mobile generation that needs to be connected all the time. They can work everywhere. They like to work in Starbucks. I'm mentioning that company a lot today, sorry about that. Actually, large accounting firm in Montreal, Deloitte, Raymond Chabot, and so on, they're changing the layout of the offices, and it's interesting. One of my old friend who works at Raymond Chabot as a transfer price director is complaining about the fact that she's going to lose her office, in the summer. There's going to be no longer no assigned desk. So evidently, this is something that we do to please this new category of people that is entering the workforce. There are also growing concerns in the environment in our society. There's a company or organization called the Future Foundation, and they claim to be the #1 independent global trend and insight firm in the world. And they argued a few years ago that new types of citizens, so that a new type of citizen is appearing, and they call this the new Puritans. These people, the new Puritans, are thinking twice before buying anything, trip, clothing, anything that they could buy, because they are conscious of the harm that can cause to the environment, the multiple impact actually on each of their action on all aspects of society is something that they consider. So they think twice before spending. So that could mean, bad news for several industries: travel, cars, clothing, etc. So those are the type of tendencies that companies might need to be aware in the social cultural segment. Evidently, political, legal segment, huge impact. Think again about the banking crisis in 2008. Why is it that the Canadian banking system survived better than other banking system? It's because it's more regulated. The next US election, what's going to be the impact on the Keystone Pipeline project or Bombardier Aerospace? Should the federal government give money to help out Bombardier and their new product? Uber, Uber, are they, or Uber, I should say, yes, are they, is this an illegal service or not? So evidently there's going to be different answers to that question in different countries. Basically, most of the elements that are listed here in this segment have to do with the level of government intervention. Very funny to see that in China, they simply decide to stop the stock exchange whenever the prices are too low. So we're now looking at the four other segments of the general environment. Evidently, the economic segment is going to be important. This helps us understand, however, that, or maybe I should say, one thing that we need to understand is that, as such, all the factors that we're reviewing here are neutral. They are neither good or bad. It depends what industry you're in. Example, when there's a recession, it might be very bad for several industries and several companies, but a firm like Dollarama or Dollar Store is going to do very, very well in times when the economic times are difficult. Natural resources, including fuel, prices are very, very low for these, and as a result, the value of Canadian dollar is going down as well. So we've mentioned that this is a concern. Technological segment, any product, process, innovation. Clearly, the internet, and I'm sorry to say that it may seem not too novel, but I really do think that we haven't stopped to see the impact that the internet will have on business. It has had a tremendous impact on supply chains, on distribution network. Some argue that the advent of internet results in cutthroat competition because of all of these, these algorithms that have been developed, enabled by the web. These black boxes, we don't really know how they work. Consumers do not understand much about them. Why is it that, again, Uber, why is it that the price changes so much when demand is high? Or even if you have a Facebook account, why is it that some ad will appear on your screen when you log in? So all that is a result of calculation algorithm that we don't really understand. May not be all that great for society, but that's another debate. The global segment, and as we were mentioning, I'm not sure that it should be a separate segment. Example, if you remember what I said earlier about regulations and the fact that it changes from one country to the other, if you are involved in a global business, this global segment is going to play a part in your analysis of each of the segment. I guess the same could be said about the physical segment. It's good news that this segment has made its way into strategy textbook, but maybe it should be more than that in a sense. Maybe the various concerns should be on our mind when reviewing any of this segment of the global environment. Okay, moving on. So this is what the model, our external analysis model looks like. So with the 7 segment, and in the middle the industry here. And as I explained earlier, I suggest that we combine together the industry environment and the competitors' environment. I guess the third level of analysis that we should have in the back of our minds. So we have the general environment, the industry, and then there's the company itself. And let me use this opportunity to make sure that you understand that when we perform the external analysis and when we look at the general environment and the industry, we do that from the perspective of a company. It is the strategist in his or her organization that performed this analysis of the industry and the general environment. So before moving to the next level, the industry, I guess we need to ask ourselves this question. What do we mean by an industry? What is an industry? And the answer is right here. So an industry is a group of firms that produce similar product or similar services. When we said earlier that any individual firm cannot have an impact on any segment of the general environment, the story is different from the industry. Any given firm can potentially have an influence on its industry. Apple is such a good example. Or even Dell, this computer company, at the beginning of the 21st century, they really were a game changer. The direct sales model that they implemented was a game changer for the industry as a whole. So it is possible to influence your industry and be the leader, actually, of that industry. All right, so we're moving on to the 5 forces model. I am fully aware that some class member know that model very well. For other, it will be more of a new thing. So I'll spend a bit of time commenting on it. I always like to say a bit what's the history behind that model. It was introduced by Michael Porter. Michael Porter is a famous strategy professor at the Harvard Business School. The model was first introduced in 1977, yeah. That's the year when Michael Porter published his article in the Harvard Business Review when the model was introduced. By the way, the Harvard Business Review it's not considered as an academic journal. It is more destined, or it targets practitioners, managers. However, new concepts are often presented in that journal, and I find it fascinating. I'm a huge fan of that journal. I think it's a great journal, and I think that any MBA students or MBA graduates should really read it regularly. I follow HBR on Twitter, and I retweet often some of their tweets. So the story says that when Porter submitted his article to HBR, it contained only 4 forces. 1 in the middle and 3 around the 1 in the middle. And apparently the journal artistic director thought that, no, it doesn't make for a nice graph. It's not balanced enough. You need to add a 5th force. This is what Porter did. However, we don't know exactly which force he added. So As I said, many of you are already familiar with that model because it has been around for a while. But I need to admit that although it's an old model, I'm a huge fan of this theory. I think that we need to understand that back in the days before this model was introduced, whenever practitioners would think about their competition, the only thing that they would envision was their competitors. And it was a pretty novel idea, or it was very innovative to open the mind of strategists and managers and to tell them, listen, you must not consider only your competitors. There are several other forces that can have an impact on your industry, that can have an impact on the potential profit that can be generated, that can be made in your industry. All right, so let's briefly review each of the forces. So first is the threat. One of the first one we can look at is a threat, the threat of the new entrant. So basically, the message here. You should not only worry about the competitors that are already in place, also worry about new companies that could be attracted to the industry. There exist a number of barriers, however, that can protect your company. For example, economies of scale. So if companies in the industry produce in high volumes and are in a situation where they can spread their fixed costs on a large number of units and therefore offer low cost, low prices, then they are in a good position to avoid the threat of new entrant in the industry. Learning curves and experience effect also can also be at play. And these cannot be acquired overnight, so they also serve to protect your company or the industry from new entrants. If we look at and again, I'm just giving a few examples. You can read the rest. I invite you to read details on each of them in your textbook. Bargaining power of the suppliers. These also need to be considered. If you are locked in a relationship with your supplier, if there are no any other options around, then you don't have a choice but to accept the terms of your supplier in terms of price or in terms of quantity. The stickers that we all have on our non-Apple computer, I should say, the sticker that says Intel inside, that tells you that the company that produces that component, Intel, is pretty powerful. When the brand of your suppliers is important enough and even stronger than your own brand, then this means that your supplier is going to have significant power over you. If we now look at the bargaining power of the buyers, so in a sense, the relationship, it's the same thing, but the other way around, looking at the power of the suppliers or looking at the power of the buyers. So what I mean is that, for example, if your company sells a unique machinery that is essential for your buyers, then the buyer will not have much power over you. However, if your buyer engages in vertical integration, this can be a threat for your company. For example, in the electronics industry, consumer electronic OEMs often give printed circuit board assembly contracts to suppliers. But when business is slow and your OEM clients find themselves with extra capacity, not only they can decide to assemble the printed circuit board in-house, and then they don't give you any business anymore, but worse, they can decide to offer their assembly services to some of your clients. So that can really pose a threat. So we can see that all these forces can play a part on how attractive will be or not the industry. We're now going to look at the substitute products. So what are substitute products? So We all understand that these are products that are of a different nature, but they can satisfy a similar need in customers. That was a pretty innovative idea when the five forces model was introduced. It meant that not only you need to worry about your competitors, but you also need to worry about companies in other industries who are offering different product. I once conducted a research project in the hi-fi industry. My team and I were comparing companies companies that used to design and produce high-end loudspeakers. I always remember a conversation that we had with people at the Polk Audio company in Baltimore. So Polk Audio is a producer of a high-end, very expensive loudspeaker. And I remember one manager telling us, I compete not only with other brand of high-end loudspeakers. I compete with the seller of luxury cars down the street or the travel agencies. In other words, it was making us understand that anything that people could do with their discretionary income, once you've paid the rent and the food, daycare and so on, what's less is money that you can spend on whatever you do. And this manager really felt that, consumer could use that leftover money and buy anything with it, not just loudspeaker, but as we said, luxury car travel and all that. I thought that was that was very interesting to see this manager having such a larger or a wide definition of what constitute its competition, and I think there was a lesson to be learned there. So we now look at the fifth force of the model, the rivalry among the existing competitors. So the factors that are listed here are going to have an impact on the intensity of rivalry between players. Evidently, if an industry is composed of numerous companies that are very similar, competition or rivalry is going to be high. But it's interesting to see that if competitors are too diverse, rivalry is also going to be intense. So why is that? Well, probably because if competitors are too diverse, it's going to be difficult to predict their moves. So this is why we can say that rivalry will be high if competitors are diverse. It's interesting also to look at this notion of switching costs. So why do we mean by switching costs? Well, they mean that switching cost means that it makes a difference for a buyer to use a different brand. For example, if you're a mid-size manufacturing company and all your shop floor people are trained to use a specific machinery, changing machines could be, or changing type of machinery could be costly for a small company with not much means. So that can be an example of a switching cost. So if it is expensive for buyers to switch cost, then rivalry is going to be less intense within the industry. We can also consider an interesting element: exit barriers. So if exit barriers are high, it's going to be difficult to exit the industry. You're trapped in it, and that serve to increase rivalry. It's interesting that these barriers can be emotional barriers. Oh no, we cannot quit from this industry. Our family firm was always a player in that industry. We cannot leave. So all sorts of reasons, some rational, some more economic, forcing you continue to stay within an industry, and that result in increasing the rivalry. So one thing we need to remember is that we don't do the 5-force analysis just for the sake of doing it. It needs to lead to a conclusion. So you're going to reach a conclusion about, maybe the industry is unattractive, or maybe the industry is attractive. Maybe there's a high potential for profit, but you need to conclude on something. We don't review the 5 forces just to say, oh, this is strong force, weak force, strong force, weak force. No. At the end of the review of the 5 forces, we need to be able to say something with regards to the attractiveness of the industry. Not only we need to reach that conclusion, but the overall analysis of the environment, so the general environment and the industry environment, should lead us to the identification of opportunities. And many of you are well aware, familiar with the SWOT analysis. So we identify opportunities, things that could potentially be good in the environment for our company. We also need to identify the threats. So threats are conditions that can potentially be dangerous for our organization. So opportunities, threats, those are two of the conclusions of the external analysis. There is something else that needs to be identified, and it's something on which not all strategy textbooks are clear, and I don't think that Heath, Ireland, and Hoskinson, the author of the book we're using this term, are clear enough about this. And I would like to draw your attention on the concept of key success factors. So there's 3 things that you need to identify at the end of your external analysis: opportunities, threats, and key success factors. What are they? They are the reason why customers will choose between competing brands. So see the examples that are listed there, so product, service, quality, distribution network, and so on. What you can conclude from these examples is that key success factors are always related either to the product itself or to the way the product is sold or made available to consumer. For example, product or service quality, technological leadership, that has to do with the product itself or the service itself that your company is offering, that a company is offering. Whereas the distribution network, shelf space, superior service, these are all related to how the product is offered. So key success factors, either characteristics of the product itself or ways in which the product is offered. Those are absolutely important elements. You need to be aware of these. They are in the industry. You're likely to find them more at the level of the industry, more than in the general environment, but still some trends in the general environment can lead to the identification or can suggest some key success factors. In the textbook, you also there's also a page or paragraph about strategic groups, and that's an interesting techniques that helps us to maybe understand a bit better the industry or the distinctive groups within a given industry. So key success factors can be used to create a chart of competitors and identify the strategic groups in the industry. And these strategic subgroups, well, within the industry, they're going to it helps us, to perform a more focused analysis of the industry. So basically, we choose strategic dimensions, and these strategic dimensions, as you can see, they are examples of key success factors that we were discussing previously. So basically what you do, and it's going to become clearer with the next slide, so basically you identify two dimensions, two key success factors that you think are will be most helpful in helping you to identify subgroups within the industry and subgroups who compete in a way that is similar. Here is an example that is taken from the Canadian beer industry. Fits well with our school, the John Molson School of Business. So basically, to create this chart, two dimensions or two key success factors were selected. So the style or quality itself of the product, from standard to premium, and the geographic coverage of the brewery, so either micro, regional, or national. So basically the size of the distribution network. And you see that you can identify groups of organization on this chart that would have similar strategies. So Labatt and Molson would be two companies competing directly with one another, where what you see are clusters of smaller breweries in different regions that compete with one another. So in terms of the five forces, your direct competitors would be the one in the strategic group. All right, chapter 2 concludes with this competitor analysis or competitive intelligence. So how you're going to perform this competitor analysis. Basically, what you see here is a list of questions that are going to help you to predict the move, where the competitors, those that are competing directly with you, where are they likely to go? What's their future objective, current strategies, assumption, capabilities? What I find interesting here is that the questions that you're going to ask yourselves to perform this competitor analysis, those are questions that are very similar to the one that we're going to ask in the next chapter when we perform the internal analysis. In other words, you're trying to know things about your competitors similar to the things that you're going to need to know about your own organization. And this is what we will see when we cover the internal analysis. And with that, thank you very much for watching this online lecture.